friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today I'm going to be showing you how to make the easy no brine method of kimchi. And also at the end of this video, I will talk you through the traditional way of making it with the salt brine. But let's get busy on this one first. So one of the things you're going to need for this particular method is some kind of fermentation starter. This can be made with any fruit or ginger root. Ginger root is actually a really good one when it comes to doing the kimchi because that gives you more of that ginger flavor in the kimchi. But any fruit-based fermentation starter will work great. Now, if you're new to making a fermentation starter, I have several videos on how to do this. I have one that's more brief and to the point and how to make it, but I also have a more in-depth one that talks more about keeping it alive and how to refresh it every now and then and the many uses of it. I will link to both of those down below. That's one of the things you're going to need. And then of course, whatever type of cabbage. Today I'm just going to be using regular green organic cabbage. Red cabbage works. I used to make this a lot using bok choy and Napa cabbage, which is also known as a Chinese cabbage, but I come to find I actually like just the basic green cabbage best for making my kimchi. I also recommend green onions, and if you have availability to fresh ginger, I highly recommend that. We can get it here, but it's very expensive and it doesn't grow well for us, so I'm going to be using a dried ginger powder. And then fresh garlic is really good in this, but today I'm going to be using dehydrated garlic slices. And then another option that I usually like to add to my kimchi is fresh sliced carrots, sliced real thin and short. But I forgot to pick up some carrots. Obviously, we've got a ways to go on our carrots before they're ready. And so, because I always keep a good stock of dehydrated carrots that I get from Mother Earth products, I'll be adding these in. That will make it simpler anyway because they're already cut real small, so they'll be perfect for using in the kimchi. And then if you like your kimchi hot, like most people do, you'll need some cayenne pepper and or some red pepper flakes. Now, another option some people like to add to their kimchi, which I've never personally done, is fish sauce. So you can look into that. It's very salty on its own, so you want to think about, you know, how much salt, how much sodium you want in this. Some people are looking for a lower salt way to make kimchi, and really this is it. But I still recommend having some salt, particularly either a Redmond Real or the Himalayan pink salt, because you're going to get more minerals that way, and the amount you use will be entirely up to you, because you can actually make this kimchi without having to have salt in it at all if you prefer. But I still like having some salt in my kimchi, so I'll be doing that. So the first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to put a little bit of my filtered rainwater, because it's a really good idea you have some kind of dechlorinated water. So if you have to use city tap water, I recommend dechlorinating it first. I have a video on several ways that you can do that, and that I will link down below. But for us, we collect and filter our own rainwater, so I know there's no chlorine or fluoride in it, so that makes it perfect for fermenting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by putting a little bit of water in each one of my jars, and I'm going to add my salt directly to that. So I'm going to put about 2 teaspoons in each one. I would say up to a tablespoon. Again, you can go as little as you'd like, or no salt if you prefer. And then I'm going to swirl that around. Okay, and then I'm going to add some of my cayenne pepper, just some to start with. So I'm going to put about a half teaspoon in there. And again, same thing with the ginger. I'll be adding more as I go. And even though I'm using some dried sliced garlic, I'm going to add a little bit of the granulated garlic as well. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start chopping up these vegetables. So let's get busy on it. However you decide to chop it is totally up to you, whatever size you want it to be. I like to have somewhat decent sized chunks, but obviously not too big. And so I'm going to drop just a handful of the cabbage in there, and then I'm going to go to my green onion. I had to go buy green onion because a lot of my green onion from last year didn't come back this year. but that's okay. Now that I bought it, I will be planting these white ends, and then I'll have green onion to last me for the rest of the year, because then that will just start growing again. I just stick it in pots out on my deck. So let's put a little of that in each, and then I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of carrot, the dried carrot to each. And same thing with the sliced garlic. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat this method with just adding it basically in layers until I have the jars completely full. If you have a vegetable tamper or something like that on hand, you can actually, Mr. Rain makes some really nice ones that he puts up on the store, but he also made me these little short rolling pins. They're kind of a little bit more squared off instead of tapered at the ends, because I like to use these when I'm rolling stuff directly in my cookie sheets. But this also works good as a vegetable tamper, so I can just really push those vegetables down in there, making room to put more. Okay, now that I've got my jars pretty well filled with the vegetables, I'm going to add some more spices to this. So I'm going to put some more ginger, about a teaspoon, another teaspoon in each one. Again, fresh ginger is excellent in this if you can get it, but dried ginger works if you don't have the fresh. And about maybe another teaspoon each of the cayenne pepper, because we like it, or I like it, pretty spicy. My oldest son loves kimchi as well, and he likes his very hot. And sometimes I like to add red pepper flakes, even though the cayenne pepper adds plenty of spice. I like the red pepper flakes in there too, because they add just a little more color to the kimchi, just making it look a little nicer. All right, now that I got that somewhat cleaned up there, and I threw some of the scraps I cleaned up into that I threw all over the counter into the jars, let's move on to the fermentation starter. This is a berry fermentation starter. It doesn't matter which one you use, but what you need is about 1/4 cup per quart jar. So if you're making this in a 1/2 gallon jar, you're going to need a 1/2 cup. And if you're making it in a full gallon jar like I have right here, then you're going to need a full cup of your fermentation starter. A Fido jar is excellent, by the way, for doing the kimchi in. But because I do like to keep it in the refrigerator, I don't like storing these big, huge jars like this in my refrigerator. So I like to go with the quart size, and I find the flavor seems to hold better when I keep it in smaller jars. So when I used to make kimchi, and I'd make like maybe 8 to 10 jars of it at a time, the traditional way, then I always went with the quart jars. I thought that was just the best. So anyway, whatever fruit that you filter out, you're just going to put it back into your jar. Let's see what we have here. I actually poured a full cup. It's okay to add more to it than 1/4 cup. You just want at least 1/4 cup. More's not going to hurt it, so I'm just going to spread it out evenly, so I will have about 1/3 cup in each one. And then make sure that you don't forget to feed your starter at this point. So I put in a tablespoon or more of sugar. That's just organic cane sugar. Yes, you can use jaggery or honey, as long as it's some kind of sugar. It has to feed off sugar. And then you're going to want to top that off with your water, and then leave your fermentation starter on your counter to sit for the rest of the day if you started this in the morning like I've done here. Okay, and now I'm just going to top the rest off with my water. You can also take your tamper and push that kind of down in there. Make sure those are going to get totally covered. Careful not to overflow. Okay, and then I like to keep tight fitting lids on mine. So I'm going to use just a standard canning lid, recycled ones, and some bands, and I'm gonna put them down, not super tight, but tight, because I want that to bubble in there. And besides that, before I do that, I'm going to shake it up really good to mix everything in together. Make sure all those spices and that fermentation starter gets blended well through all of the vegetables. And there we go. Now it's ready to sit and ferment. This is going to take a minimum of 3 to 5 days, and how long you allow it to sit is going to be entirely up to you. I would say if it's very bubbly at day 3, taste it and see if you like the flavor there. If you want it to be more tart, leave it out on your counter for as long as it takes to get the flavor that you really want. I find between 3 to 5 days tends to be just right for me, as long as it's very fizzy, because that's how I like my kimchi, very spicy and very fizzy. And then every day what you're going to want to do is, once it starts getting fizzy, you're going to just want to loosen that band a little bit until you hear that fizziness come out, until you hear that sound, and then tighten that band back down. Basically, you're just burping it. Now, some people like to use the pickling tops. That's always an option. I prefer to do it this way. The one thing about the Fido jars, if you're using that, all you have to do is loosen up that. Try to keep the lid from coming too far open, and then just enough to release those gases, and then clamp it back down again. Okay, now let me talk you through the traditional method that I used to do for many years. I started making kimchi, it was probably about 20 years ago, maybe longer, I don't remember. All I remember is my oldest son, even though he was just a fairly young child, he fell in love with the kimchi right off the bat. I wanted to throw out one more idea, by the way. If you don't like the idea of burping, but you don't want to get the oxygen, air, whatever, maybe any other contaminants into your kimchi, there's always, and you don't want to buy the pickling tops, if you already have an airlock that you might use for mead making, or wine making, like I have going right here, and you should have just seen a video on this. If you're interested in this, I will link to that video down below. But I have the airlocks on there. You can get them pretty inexpensively. And then if you have the equipment, just drill a hole into a regular old canning lid, the right size, so that your drilled cork, this is a rubber stopper, will fit inside there. And so I've done that before when I wanted to make a real small batch of wine, because I was experimenting with something, I don't remember what it was, and I didn't want to go for a whole gallon, I just wanted to do a quart. So I had Patrick make me a couple of these, so when I'm doing smaller experiments I can do that instead of that. And so that's always an option. Now on to the traditional way. So the traditional way, the way I used to do it, was I would get a huge glass bowl, because I wanted to fill as many mason jars as I could. I would put all the cabbage, the napa and the bok choy, whatever it was, into the big bowl. I would chop it up and I would layer it, and I would sprinkle the sea salt around the top of each layer, put in another layer, sprinkle it across, and keep doing that until the bowl was full or I'd used up all my cabbage. And then I would stick my hands into the bowl and massage the salt into the cabbage, and then I would let it sit overnight. What that does is that salt, it will soften the cabbage, and it will also help draw a lot of the excess water out of it. And so the next day I would drain it out and then rinse it really well, because it's a lot of salt. You don't want to leave that in there, that salt brine. Obviously some salt's still going to stay in there, but you don't want all that in there, or it's way too salty, and it can prevent a good ferment if you leave too much in. Then after I did that, all of that cabbage would go back into the bowl, and that's when I would start adding my green onions, my spices, and my carrots sliced up real small. And then again, once I got all that cayenne pepper and garlic and whatever in there, I would massage those spices into the vegetables and mix it really good by hand. And then I would start putting all of that into my jars. And there was usually enough liquid in the bowl once I was done that I could top the jars off with that. Now, a lot of people that do it this way now, they will just set it on their counter like I'm doing here inside and leave it for 3 to 5 days. The length of the process is about the same. But the more traditional method meant actually letting it ferment for 2 weeks in cold storage. So that could be, like when I was doing it in the winter time, I would actually stick it out in the greenhouse where it would be protected but not too warm. It would actually stay cold. But then the rest of the year, I would stick it in my refrigerator. So I did all of the actual fermenting in the refrigerator itself. None of it happened on the counter. So doing it out in a warmer area does speed up the process. From what I understand, the Koreans would actually put theirs in a crock that they would then bury in the ground and leave for at least 2 weeks up to 6 months in the crock in the ground, and the ground would keep it insulated and cool. So that is the old way to do it, but there's so many ways to make kimchi. You got to find which one works for you. I like this method in the fact that I can use less salt, it's quicker, it's simpler, and I can have a nice fizzy kimchi in about 3 days. I've actually seen it get fizzy in 24 hours, but I still left it for at least 3 days, so all those flavors and the fermenting could really get to work on those vegetables, making them that much more healthy. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that it gave you some ideas of what you want to do to get started in making your own kimchi. If you haven't done it already, or if you've already been making kimchi, maybe this is just a new method you might like to try just to see if you like it. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.